All right, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. So Baruch Hashem, today we start a new parak, Daf Lamed Beis. A lot to do today. A lot of beautiful Gemara. So Shaliach et Lishto. So we'll say. So now it's interesting that So at some point in time, when you go through yeshiva, you've always learned Gittin. At some point in time, especially this particular parak of Hashaleach. This you'll see why there's a lot of yisodistic stuff in this particular. It's not stuff. A lot of yisodistic ideas in this particular parak. So it's an exciting adventure. So Hashaleach get liishto. Someone sends a get to his wife. V'yegia b'shliach. So what happens over here? After the husband dispatches the shaliach to go ahead and give the get to his wife, the husband catches up with the shaliach. Sheshalach acharov shaliach. Or a person goes ahead and what? So I appoint shaliach, Reuven appoints shliach A to deliver the get to his wife. Then he appoints shliach B to go and run after shliach A. Va'amar lo. And he says either to the shaliach, again, both say this is either one of the first two cases. Either the husband says to the shaliach or shaliach B says to shaliach A, va'amar lo, get shenasati lecha batalhu. The get that I gave you, it's batal. Get that I gave you is void. So what's the halacha? Harei ze batal. Ultimately, the get is voided. Now, both sides, we are going to discuss what exactly this means that the get is voided. Does this mean the document is void? So we're going to get to it. So, however, let's say kidem eitzal ishto. Both say the next case is, let's say again, Reuven dispatches a shaliach to go ahead and deliver a get to his wife, and what happens? Reuven runs to his wife before the shaliach gets there. And what happens? Osha shalach etzla shaliach. Or Reuven appointed shaliach A to deliver the get, and then he sends another shaliach to go ahead and run to his wife, and he gives her the message, Va'amar la, get sheshalachti lecha, batalhu. The get I sent you, it's batal. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Harei ze batal. The get is batal. However, im mishiagia get liyada, shuv and yachal levatlo. But I will say, the halacha is, all of this, essentially what the Mishnah is telling me is what? That if a husband dispatches a shaliach to give a get to his wife, and the get has not yet reached the hand of the woman, then what? Husband has the ability to be mavatal, either in one of two ways. Either by being mavatal the shaliach, or by getting to the wife before the shaliach gets there and telling her, by the way, the get is batal. However, once the get has reached the hand of the woman herself, shuv eino yachol levatlo. He's done. Right? In other words, once she receives the get, lemais, again, he no longer has the ability to be mavatal it. Berishon nahaya osa beizim imakom acher o mevatlo. So this is interesting. In the beginning, Rashi says over here, look at Rashi Berishona, the haya mevatlo b'fnei hashaliach v'lo b'fnei ha'isha, ela b'makom shaya omet haya mevatlo b'fnei shlosha. In the beginning, it used to be that if a husband wanted to be mevatal a get, so what would he do? He would assemble a group of 3 people. Rashi says over here, he would assemble. Did Rashi say 3? No, the truth is, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say 3, because we'll see in the machlokes in the Gemara. So ultimately, in the beginning, he would assemble a beis din, not in the presence of the woman and not in the presence of the shaliach, and he would be mavatel, he would negate the get. I will say, so obviously, you could understand that such a circumstance like that could create very difficult circumstances. Why? Because the shaliach has no idea to get his bottle, the woman has no idea to get his bottle. Shaliach goes, thank you, Mark. Shaliach goes ahead and delivers the get to the woman. She thinks she's divorced. She goes on and she gets remarried. So what happens? Meanwhile, the get is void, right? The get is already bottle. And again, she doesn't even realize it. Therefore, Hiskin Rabbi Gamliel Azakein Shelo Yu Osin came Mipnei Tikun Olam. So what's Rabbi Gamliel? Rabbi Gamliel the elder was metakein that if a husband wants to negate a get, he cannot use this process. He can't just assemble a beis din and negate the get. Rather, he must do, we'll discuss how he has to do it, but apparently he has to do it in one of the ways prescribed earlier in the Mishnah. Either get to the wife first, or get to the shaliach. Take a look at Rashi. Mipnei tikun ha'olam, shashliach she'eni yodeh b'davar malicho lo v'hi neseis bo. Because obviously, we'll see the tikun ha'olam over here is that the shaliach has no idea that the get has been is mevutal. He's batal, and therefore he goes on and still delivers it. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel Azak, in order to avoid any potentially catastrophic circumstances, was metakein ultimately instituted that a husband cannot be mevatel a get in front of a beis din outside of the presence of the isha or the shaliach. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Says, well, let's look at the Gemara. Says higio lo katani ele higio. So we'll say, if you notice again, the lashon of the first part of the Mishnah says, "Hashaliach get leishto." Ruvain dispatched an agent to deliver deliver a get to his wife, and then it says v'higia v'shaliach. And we'll say the lashon of v'higia means what? He happened upon. He happened upon, meaning he wasn't looking for the shaliach. Rather, again, he happened upon the shaliach. So the Mishnah says, the Gemara says, interestingly enough, higia lo katani. The lashon of higio means he caught up with the shaliach. That's not what the Mishnah says. It doesn't say higio. Rather, it says higia. Higia will say meaning what? He bumped into the shaliach. Even if it just happens to be that he bumped into it. What is the Mishnah? What is the Gemara describing? The following case. So Reuven dispatches a get to his wife, and what happens? He's out in the supermarket, and who does he bump into? He bumps into the shliach. Hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha pratis. Right, I bumped into you. The Rebbe clearly doesn't want me to go. Right, clearly doesn't want me to go ahead and divorce my wife, so I'm being mevatel the shlichus. So the Gemara says, we don't say, I will say that the reason he's negating the get is to make her life miserable. Now I will say, what does that mean? See, because the Gemara is saying like this, I would have thought if the guy really wants to be mevatel the get, because maybe he wants to give the marriage another try, he would have gone out of his way to go out and find the shaliach. The fact that he's being mevatel get after he bumps into the shliach, maybe he's just trying to make her life miserable and make her wait a little bit longer for the get. To which the Gemara says, the Mishnah is teaching us that we're not choshesh for that. That we assume if he's mevatel the get, it's because he wants to do so for a good reason. Look at Rashi, velo amrinon, ein bedaito levatlo, elo letziura ba'alma, chodesh, so we'll say we don't say that because he's been mevatel to get after he bumped into the shaliach that his intention is to make her life miserable. Because had he really wanted to be mevatel to get, he would have run after the shaliach. Rather, we take him at face value that he wants to go ahead and be mevatel to get because he wants to give the marriage another chance. Oh, sheshalach acharav shaliach lamali. So we'll say, so what the Gemara is not going to ask is, the Mishnah tells me 4 different variations of the same basic case, which is what? Which is that if a man sends a get to his wife, he has the ability to be mevatel the get as long as what? It hasn't reached her hand. So why do you have to keep telling me this? I mean, why do you have to give me all the examples? Just tell me the principle and I understand. So for example, what was the second case? Case number 2 was that Ruvain, who's the husband, sent a shliach to divorce his wife, and then he sent a second shliach after shliach number 1 to tell shliach number 1 not to deliver the get. So the Gemara says, why do I need this case? What would I have thought? Lo alima shluchuse de basra mishlichuse de kama de levatle. Oh, it would say, I might have thought that perhaps shliach number 2 is no stronger than shliach number 1. And therefore, perhaps shliach number 2 doesn't have the power to be mevatel the shlichos of number 1. Kamashmal on the Mishnah teaches us that that's not correct. That shliach number 2 does have the ability to go ahead and be mevatel shliach number 1. Next case, kidem hu itzal ishto lamali. So we'll say. So remember, the next case in the Mishnah was husband dispatched a shliach with a get for his wife. Husband runs to the wife before the shliach gets there and says, "The get that you're getting, it's bottle." So Gemara says, "Lamali, why do I need that case?" Mal detema kilo amin let's hear kamechavein hani mili l'shliach aval lidida vaday litziura kamechavein. So we'll say, I might have thought that when do we say that he's not trying to make her life miserable? That's when he sends a shaliach after the shaliach. But for him to show up at her house and tell her before the shliach gets there that the get is bottle, perhaps I have to be choshesh for the fact that all he's trying to do is make her life miserable. Therefore, Kamashman says the Gemara that no, that's not what we assume. We assume that he has legitimate grounds ultimately for being mevatel the get. Next case, Osha Shalach Etzla Shaliach Lamali. Or I will say again, remember the next case in the Mishnah was Ruvain sends a shaliach to deliver the get, and then he sends a second shaliach to get to the wife before the get arrives at the wife, and the second shaliach tells the wife that the get is bottle. So why do I need that case? Ma'odetema ihu delo tarach adait letzura. Ava shaliach delo ichpaslei ki tarach vade letzura kamachavi. I might have trouble. So when do we say that he's not trying to make her life miserable? That's when he takes the time to go to the wife himself. But because again, he's not going to waste his own time if his only intention is to make her life miserable. But if he's just dispatching the shaliach, he doesn't care so much about the shaliach's time. So maybe he's just trying to make her life miserable. Meaning he's trying to move out to the get just to make her life more difficult. Kamashmala, no. Kamashon that halacha l'mais, we don't assume that. Rather, we assume in all of these cases that the husband has legitimate reasons ultimately for being mevatel the get. By the way, you should know, I'm saying reconciliation, but there are other reasons. There could be other financial reasons also why the husband is not ready to give the get. The reasons right now don't matter. The point the Gemara is making is that they're legitimate. We don't assume that he's trying to make her life miserable by being mevatel the get, but ultimately we assume that there's some type of legitimate reason for it, and therefore ultimately he is believed. So the Gemara says, Im get liada eniyachal levatlo. So we'll say, so again, remember, what did the Mishnah say next? Once she receives the get, he no longer has the ability to be mevatel it. To which the Gemara says, pshita. I mean, okay, that's pretty obvious. To which the Gemara says, no, we'll say that's very interesting. Lo tricha dimahader ale meikar levatule. So we'll say the case over here is where we saw him trying to be mevatel the get earlier. We'll say, let me frame this for you in the right way, which is actually quite interesting. The Gemara says, so for example, let's say the following case. Reuven goes ahead and sends a get to his wife. So he gives the get to the shaliach. Shaliach, deliver the get to my wife. And then what happens? And then we see him scurrying around to try to find another shaliach to send after the first shaliach. So, and we say, what's wrong? He says, I need to send another because I'd like to try to be mevatel the get. So we see what he's trying to do. We see what he's trying to do. So I might have thought in that case, but yet he's unsuccessful. The get arrives at his wife before he has the ability to be mevatel the shlichus. So I might have thought in a case like this, since we saw what we'll call, an expression of his intent through his actions, although not explicitly articulated, I might have thought that therefore the get is batal. Kamash malan, no. Kamash malan, that again, Abba said, in the absence of an explicit articulation that he's being mevatel the get, we do not infer from his actions that he wants to be mevatel the get. So ma'aditim, what would I have thought? Igali milsal mafreya debatule batle. I might have thought that just situationally, since we see him trying to go ahead and get a second shaliach to go ahead and run after the first, that perhaps that's enough of a clear expression of intent that he wants to be mevatel the get, that the get should be batal. Kamash malan, that is not the case. I will say kamash malan, that halacha l'maisa, again he has to go and be explicit. And I will say, in fact, the Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. The Shulchan Aruch writes the following. He says, in order for a husband to be mevatel the get, he says there has to be a clear expression of intent. For example, let's say the husband tracks down the shaliach, and the shaliach says, Lo nasativ la adayin. This is from the Shulchan Aruch. This is Even HaEzer, Kuf Mem Aleph Sif Samech Beis. So he says to the shaliach, so he tracks down the shaliach says, I didn't give the get yet. Va'amar, Baruch HaTov HaMeitiv, and the husband says, Baruch Hashem, Shulchan Aruch Paskins, Eino Batal. The get is not batal. Why is the get not batal, Rabbi Osai? Because the Maisikin, as we're going to see, in order for the get to be batal, there has to be an explicit statement that I'm being mevatel the get. V'lo od, so Shulchan Aruch writes, not only that, Ella, afilu haya machzir lorutz achar shleach levatlo, v'lo hispik la'agia elav acha tagia liada, eina batal. Even so, let's say again, the shliach is going to the wife. The husband is mamish huffing and puffing. He's running after the shaliach. Now it's clear, we understand situationally that, or from the context that he's running after the shaliach to be mevatel the get. We'll say again, the only way to be mevatel the get, the Gemara is telling me, is an explicit statement of bittul. We're going to discuss now exactly what statements constitute an explicit bittul, but the idea the Gemara is teaching me is we don't infer anything from situational context. And again, even more, even if the Sheh says, I didn't give the get, and he says, Baruch Hashem, which I will say we would infer to mean that the husband doesn't want the get to be given. Shulchan Aruch says that's not enough of an explicit lashon to be mevatel the get. So with that, let's go back here a little bit. Ten Rabbanim. So I will say now the Gemara is going to discuss some of the expressions of bittul. So Tan Rabbanan, batal hu, if a person says about the get, batal hu. Now Rashi says batal hu, mashma batal yehei v'chini efshibo. So I'll say batal, the Gemara understands right now to mean it should be batal. It should be, the get should be batal. Ef shibo, I do not want the get to ultimately be chal. Dvarav kayamin, his words are effective. I will say now, why are his words effective? We'll see in just a moment. So pasalhu, if however he says the get is pasal, no get, or it's not a get, lo amar klum, his words are ineffective. Now we'll say, take a look at Rashi. Pasalhu, lo mashma di'iu mevatale, Elamotzi alav shem pasal v'haleka. Well, so listen to this distinction. So if a man says the get is pasal or this is not a get, so the Gemara is saying that is not an effective statement. Why is it not an effective statement, Rabbosai? Because when you say pasal or eino get, what you're saying is the document is not an effective document. Now that is a false statement. Why is it a false statement? Because the get is perfectly kosher. The get itself is fine. Which Rabbosai, by the way, this is now getting to the core of the issue, which is when we say that a husband is being mavatal a get. So what does that mean? Is he undermining the effectiveness of the document? He's saying the document no longer works? Or is he being mavatal the shlichos and saying the shaliach can no longer deliver the get? And therefore if the shliach continues to go ahead and act, he's going rogue. And he's not representing me anymore, and therefore the delivery of the get is ineffective. So we'll get to that question just a little bit. What the Gemara is saying is like this. Therefore, if you want to be mavatal the get, the husband needs to use an expression that essentially says, I don't want this anymore. That's what batal means I'm being mavatal this process. From going forward, I don't want this get delivered. But if the husband tries to make us say that the get itself is not good, that is an ineffective statement because the get itself is good. V'haraya, it's written properly, and even more than that, there are witnesses who signed on it. So the witnesses who signed on it ultimately, again, signed on a kosher document, and their signatures create an effectiveness for the document. To which the Gemara says, L'meimra, de batal lishna, dili batal mashma. So we'll say, is this to tell us ultimately again that batal, when he says batal, that batal is a future lashon. Because remember again, the way the Gemara is understanding it over here is that batal is effectively the husband saying, going forward, I do not want this get to be effective, which is another way of saying I'm closing down this process. So is that to say that batal means future? It should be batal. If somebody received the get, and I will say, so listen to this case. So Reuven receives a matana, a gift. And after he received the matana, he says, matana zu muvuteles, ti batel ef shibalo amar klum. If he says, this matana is batel, it should be batel, or I don't want it, such a statement ultimately is ineffective. Rashi says over here, lo amar klum, v'zacha ba'al karcho, he has acquired the gift, ve'im yesh lo ba'al chov gova osa b'shvilo. Lefi shekol halashonas halalu lashon asidhein v'hoil v'kabla ina yachal lachzero. So we'll say, here's the issue. If a person receives a gift, and he says, matana zu mevuteles or ti batel, it's right, it's mevuteles or it's batel, or should be batel. So ultimately that lashon doesn't work. Why? Because with matana, once it comes into your hands, what's the halacha? It's yours. It's yours. So to say a lashon that it should be batel ultimately does not work. On the other hand, betelahi, if you use the lashon of betelahi, it is batel, eino matana, or it's not a matana, then dvarav kayamin. Then ultimately, again, what? His words work. Look at Rashi, betelahi, mashma betela haisa mikodem shekibalti. We'll say, so betelahi means, from the beginning, I never had intention. I never had in mind to go ahead and acquire the matana. So lashon mashma betela haisa mikodem shekibalti. So we'll say, listen to this. Actually, I think the camera's off, by the way. So what happens? Alma bata meikara mashma. So we'll say, so what do you see from here? You see from here that therefore again, batal means past. So also you understand what's going on over here? The Gemara by get, let's just contrast the two cases for just a moment. By get, the Gemara wanted to say that if the husband says batal, the get should be batal. That is an effective lashon. Why? Because we'll say that's not talking about the get, the document, rather it's talking about the process. I want to end the process now. I don't want it to progress anymore. I want it to stop. Okay, so fine. So batal therefore means future lashon. By matana, at the end of the day, what is the Gemara saying? By matana, if I receive the matana, but I don't want to take ownership of that gift, if I use lashon of betelahi means what? That from the beginning, I never had in mind to acquire this gift. Therefore, what? Betelahi is a lashon avar. It's a past tense lashon. So you understand the contradiction. The Gemara by Gittin wants to say that batal is a future lashon, but yet by matana we're saying that it's a past tense lashon. So what's the pshat? Amar Abaye. Therefore Abaye says Amud Beis. Amar Abaye. Batal shtei lashonos mashma. So therefore Abaye says in reality, batal Abose has two meanings. Batal has two meanings. So the Gemara says shtei lashonos mashma. Mashma de batal, umashma de li batal. Sometimes batal means that it is batal past tense, like by matana, and sometimes it means de li batal, it should be batal going forward, like by get. Gabe get, lishna de mahanibe, kamar, gabe matana, Lishna de Mahani Beikama. So this is actually quite interesting. So the Gemara suggests, and by the way, this is not the only example of this. There are a number of different words that have multiple meanings. And depending on the situation in which they are used is the meaning that we activate. Therefore, says the Gemara, the lashon of batel could have a lahaba, a future definition, or a sha'ava, or a past tense definition. Depending on the circumstances in which you're using, will depend on which definition is activated. Therefore, I will say when it comes to get, where I need a future lashon, because remember again, if I use past tense, then it sounds like what? I'm negating the document. And that is an ineffective way of being mavatal the get, because the document is perfectly fine. Therefore, by gittin, bata will ultimately mean future. By matana, where I don't want to receive the matana, but the only way not to receive the matana is how? Is if I use a past tense lashon. Because again, then I'm saying from the beginning, because remember when it comes to matana, once you receive that in your hand, you own it. You own it. The only way not to own the matana is how? By saying that from the beginning, I never wanted to acquire it. So essentially, batal will employ whatever definition is best for the context in which it's used. So the Gemara says again, "Gabe get lishna de mahani bekamar, gabe matana lishna de mahani bekamar." Amar Abai. Abai said, furthermore, Naktinon, we learn shliach matana harihu k'shliach haget. I will say now, once we're going ahead and linking matana and get, which is an interesting linkage, right, between a gift and a get. So we're extending this linkage a little bit more as well. So Abai says that a shliach who delivers a matana is like a shaliach who delivers a get. How so? Nafkamina, the practical difference, meaning the common denominator is laholech lav kischidami. That I will say in both of these circumstances, telling a shaliach to deliver something is not the equivalent of telling them to acquire it on behalf of the intended recipient. Remember, we spent a lot of time on the sugya of holech kischi, holech lav kischi. So therefore, the Gemara says again, the common denominator both by matana as well as by get is that if you instruct a shaliach, an agent, to deliver a get to a woman or a matana to a particular person, instructing them to deliver the item is not tantamount to telling them to acquire the item on behalf of the individual. That's the common denominator between both of these cases. Look at Rashi. Garsina nafkamina laholich lav kischi va'af agav dematana zechusu matzi lemahadar deholich lav kischi dami. So we'll say again, the novelty in this ruling, of course, is much more by matana, because by get I understand why holich is lav kischi dami, because again, get generally we assume is not a zechus, is not a benefit for the woman. And therefore I understand whether shaliach can't acquire it on behalf. The chiddush, of course, is by matana. We assume that matana usually is an objective benefit for the individual, and therefore I would say that zachin adam shalom b'fanav, that you could do something beneficial for a person even not in their presence. Kamash malan, the common denominator between matana and get is that when a man instructs an agent to deliver either a get or a matana to another party, deliver just means what? Just means deliver. Doesn't mean acquire on behalf of the intended recipient. Fine. Ravina Ashkeche Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak the Tali v'kai be'ivra didasha. So we'll say Ravina found Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. This lashon of the Tali v'kai be'ivra didasha, we'll say means he saw him leaning on the doorpost. He was hanging out a little bit, right? He saw him leaning on the doorpost. V'kami baile, and he asked the following question: Batel mahu. I will say, what happens if the husband just uses the lashon of batel? See, Ravos, I remember again in the previous Gemara, the lashon that the husband was using was batal hu. Batal hu. It should be batal. It should be batal, which we understood by Gittin to mean what? The process should be batal going forward. Let's say he didn't say batal hu, he just said batal. He just said batal. Look at Rashi, will say batal mahu, im amar batal v'lo amar hu. Mahu l'sha'avra mashma ve'in b'dvarv klum kivan d'lo amar hu o dilma belohu nami beis l'shonos mashma v'lishna da'hani be'kamar. So we'll say the interesting shaila is, does batal by itself mean future tense, or does batal by itself mean past tense? Does the hu make a difference or not? To which the Gemara says teku. The truth is, so ultimately again, who was this? This was so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said we don't know. Amar of Sheish Samle Masnisa Tana Get ze lo yoil, lo yatir, lo yaazov, lo yishlach, lo yigarish. So let's listen to this. If a man says the following lashonos, this get should not help, this get should not permit, this get lo yaziv should not allow her to leave, lo yishlach should not send her away, v'lo yigarish should not divorce her, yehei cheres, it should be earthenware, yehei kicheres, it should be like earthenware, dvarav kayamin. Then ultimately, again, his words work. His words work. Then I both say, now ultimately, the lashon over here, if you look at all these shows, what he's saying over here is, this get should not do this get should not do that. Which I will say, if you notice, what is he not saying? He's not talking about the document. Rather, what is he talking about over here? He's talking about the process. Right? He's saying, I don't want the divorce to go forward. So I don't want the get to affect these circumstances and these processes. I'm not talking about the effectiveness of the get. The get itself is still a totally proper document, but I don't want the get to have these circumstances. Therefore, a person makes those declarations, that's absolutely fine. However, listen to this. If he says, Eino moil, this get doesn't help. Eino matir, this get doesn't permit. Eino ma'aziv, this get does not allow her to leave me. Eino mishach, this get does not send her away. Eino magaresh, this get does not divorce her. Cheres, this get is cheres. Cheresu, it is cheres. Ki cheresu, this get is like cheres. Then what? Lo omer klum. Then he hasn't said anything. Why, Rabbosai? Why? Because first of all, two reasons. First of all, Rashi points out over here. First of all of these lashonos are past tense, which Rabbosai is another way of saying that. What is he commenting on? He's commenting on the document. So once he's commenting on the document, Rabbosai, remember again, he's not believed to negate the document. Why? Because the document is perfectly fine. The document is perfectly legitimate. So here's the interesting idea, and this is we're going to get into this now. The idea is if the husband wants to shut down the process going forward, he absolutely has that right. If he's trying to undermine the effectiveness of the document by saying the document itself was never kosher, that doesn't work. Why? Because it's wrong. Because it is. Because the document is effective. The document is perfectly good. The document, again, was written Lishma. The document was signed by Eidim. So therefore, the husband ultimately is not believed to undermine the effect of this document. So I say, it's just so interesting. There's such a musar in this. What's the musar in this? The musar is how the smallest nuanced change in words has such different meanings. The truth is, you don't need me to tell you this. We all know this. Sometimes you say something that at first glance should be innocuous, but the way you said it, the tone you said it, the particular word choice fundamentally changes everything. So it's amazing how a husband could say, get ze lo yoil. If he says, ultimately, this get should not do anything, then what? Then it works. Then that's a proper lashon. But if he says, lo yoil, this doesn't work, then l'mayis, again, it doesn't work. The idea over here is just, again, it's an interesting musar. Anyway, so the Gemara says the following. So we'll say, therefore, common denominator is, if his lashon is future-oriented, then we understand he's not talking about the document, he's talking about the process. He has the ability to shut that down. If his lashon is past tense, then what it seems to be he's trying to do is undermine the effectiveness of the document, and that he does not have the ability to do. Say bailu, another kasha. Bailu, harehu cheres mahu. What happens if he says, this should be like cheres, right? I should say it's not like that. Literally, the translation is harehu. Behold, this is cheres. So Rashi says over here, what's the halacha? Lahaba mashma or the sha'avar mashma. So we'll say, is that a future expression or a past tense expression? So Amali Ravina Ravacha Brei Dirava, Vamri Ravacha Brei Dirava Ravashi. So I can answer this. Maishna meharehu hekdish. We'll say, why should this be different than the statement of, behold, this is Hekdish, behold, this is Hefker? We'll say, if a person says, Harehu Hekdish, Harehu Hefker, so we'll say, what kind of statement is that? That's a future statement, right? Because again, if I'm saying, behold, this is Hekdish, that's saying, now it's nothing, I'm making it Hekdish going forward. So to Harehu Cheres should also be a future Lashon as well, and therefore it should work. Okay, so we'll say, now we get to the core question. So we'll say, so we've been talking about what? We've been talking about over here a husband's ability to be mevatel a get. So let's just take a very simple case. Husband appoints a shaliach, right? Reuven appoints a shaliach, deliver a get to my wife. Fine, shaliach takes off. Reuven decides an hour later there's a change of heart. He runs after the shaliach. He says, I'm being mevatel the get. What's the halacha? Shlichus is batal, right? The get is batal. But I'll say what's been bothering us in a very acute fashion this entire time is what? What does that mean? What does that mean? What is he being mavatal? When we see he's negating the get, what does that mean? So we'll say, watch this. Now the Gemara says, the way to answer this question is to ask another question. How so? Listen to this. Choser umegarish bo, eno choser megarish bo. Oh, we'll say this question is going to tell us exactly what's unfolding in the process. Let's play this out. Same case. Reuven appointed the shliach to deliver a get to his wife. Reuven runs out to the shliach, says, shliach, I'm being mavatal the get. Fine, done. Now what happens? He's got a perfectly good get. So he goes home, he says, let's make this work. They get into another fight, he's saying, forget this. And he's going to divorce her. Can he use that same get to divorce her or not? Right? Can he go ahead and use the same get to divorce her? Choser umegarish bo? Oh, we know choser megarish bo. Also, look at Rashi. Choser megarish bo and nimlach habalach. So the garish beget shabitlo. So the same get. But leaving aside, by the way, I know what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, what about Zman? Oh, Zman. Excellent kasha. Right? Now, again, let's leave that aside for now, because there are ways that we can get around that. So now, could he use this same document to go ahead and divorce? So look at the next Rashi. It was a very important Rashi. Mi Aminan, here's the core kasha, says Rashi. Batal Gita, v'havile kechasba, o dilma shlichusa d'shliach u'debatale ad dehadar, o mashvile shliach, aval Gita lo batal. So Rashi, you know what the core question is about? Say, our question. When the Mishnah says that you could be mavatal a get, what are you being mavatal? Are you being mavatal the document, or are you being mavatal the shlichus? What's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is, if you're being mavatal the shlichus, then what? The get is perfectly good. Get is perfectly good. Get is perfectly fine. Again, leaving the dating issues. The get is perfectly fine. But if you're being mavatal the get, then the get is kechaspa. The get is like a pottery shard, and therefore, if you change your mind and now you want to divorce your wife, then what's the halacha? You have to write a brand new get. So says the Gemara, this is the shayla choser megarisho and choser megarisho. So can you use the same document again? Can you use the get? But say this is the discussion. Rav Nachman Amar choser megarish bo. Rav Nachman says yes. You can go ahead and use the get again, because Rav Nachman is saying Abosai, when we speak about the fact that you're being mavatal the get, it's not really true. You're not really being mavatal the get. What are you being mavatal? You're being mavatal the shlichus. Remember again, once you're mavatal the shlichus, once say essentially to a shliach, I'm being mavatal the get, that's another way of saying you are no longer my shaliach. Once he's no longer your shaliach, he's no longer acting on behalf of the husband, which means what? That even if he delivers the get on both sides, it's totally meaningless. Because remember again, the shaliach is an extension of the arm of the husband. Once the husband essentially amputates the extension, whatever the extension does is halachically no longer misyaches. It's no longer connected to the husband himself. Therefore, Nachman says he's mavatal sheh, but the get itself is perfectly good. Therefore, if tomorrow the husband decides, you know what, I do want to divorce you, then halach lemaisi could use the same get. Rav Sheshes says no. In a choser megarish bo. Rav Sheshes also seems to say no. That lemaisi again, when you're mavatal the get, you're mavatal the effectiveness of the document. And once you're mavatal the effectiveness of the document, you can no longer use it to divorce her again. And the Gemara says, V'hilchasa kavasei de Rav Nachman. The halacha follows Rav Nachman say that's what? That lemaisa, again, when you're mavatal the get, you're not really being mavatal the get, you're being mavatal the shlichus. And therefore, again, should the husband have a change of heart and want to divorce his wife, then what? He has the ability to go ahead and use the same document. The Ini, is that true? Says the Gemara. V'ha kaimalon hilchasa kavase de Rabbi Yochanan de Amar chozeres. But yet, Rabosai, we said that the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says chozeres. Rabosai, now she could retract. Now, what are we talking about over here? Look at Rashi. Ke Rabbi Yochanan de Amar chozeres b'kiddushin. But say this is by a case of kiddushin. Once again, it's b'merak omer lechavero amar leisha his kachli b'maos halalu. A man says to his wife, or a man says to a woman, become mikudeshes to me with these monies, la'achar shloshim, after 30 days. After 30 days. So we'll say, so the case over here is, he gives her money, he gives her kesef kiddushin on the first of the month, and he says, in 30 days from now, let this be kesef kiddushin, and she accepts it. The chazra b'sok shloshim, but what happens? 15 days later, she has a change of heart. She says, I don't want it. I don't want it anymore. So what's the halacha? Bitla kiddushin, hoil ubitalton kodim shuchalin, hachanam li batal gita. So we'll say, what do you see from here? She has the ability to be mavatal the kesef kiddushin. Why? Because before it's been chal, she has the ability to be mavatal it. So therefore, I would assume the same halacha applies over here. So what happens? Husband gave the shaliach the ability to go out and deliver a get. husband is mevatel it. So as long as the get has not yet reached the hands of the woman, he has the ability to what? The ability to what? To be mevatel. Rabbi said, I would apply to the same case of kiddushin. Just like in kiddushin, what is she being mevatel when she reneges on this? What is she being mevatel? She's being mevatel the case of kiddushin. So too over here, when he reneges, what should he be mevatel? He should be mevatel the get itself. To which the Gemara says, no. Hachi hashta hasam dibor v'diborhu. Asi dibor mevatel dibor. Rabbi said, in the case of kiddushin, all there really was a dibor. Right? He said, Harat mikudeshesli, and right, bekesevzu, la'achar shloshim yom, and she says, okay. So her okay, she could be mavatal her okay dibor with what? With saying, I no longer want this. Remember, the kiddushin doesn't take place until after 30 days. Therefore, one dibor can be mavatal another dibor. Look at Rashi. Dibor v'diborhu mitchila haisa miskadeshes ayidei dibor shenizrat b'kiddushin asi dibor shel chazar mevatel dibor umi amos labatul shim chazar v'kitsha ban midayt mikudeshas. So we'll say over here, all you have is a dibor. He had a dibor. I want you to become mikudeshas me after 30 days. She accepted that dibor with her own dibor, her own affirmative dibor. She can now go ahead and say, I changed my mind and I don't want this anymore. However, asi dibor mevatel dibor hacha nehi debatle lishlichusa deshliach. Gita gufa mikabatal, but Rabbi says is a Gita gufa mikabatal. So even though again in this case over here that the shaliach, I remember just Gita gufa mikabatal. I learned Gittin in 9th grade, and a Rebbe they used to say this phrase with a particular I know what the word is, a twang like Gita gufa mikabatal. So it just reminded me. So the Gemara says the following. So therefore, again, the Gemara says over here, but by get, when the husband is mevatel, the shaliah, when the husband is mevatel, he's only mevatel the shlichus. Is he actually being mevatel the get? Look at Rashi. V'hachanehi, hay de'amar batalhu, l'shliachu debatle, shelo yehe shlucho legarsha beget. That when the husband says that the get is batal, he's being mevatel ultimately the shaliach. He's saying to the shaliach, ultimately, you're no longer my shaliach. To go ahead and be megarish the isha, the asi dibor umavatal dibor. Aval get shehu be'en einonif. So Rabbi said the get, which is be'en, still in existence, the husband cannot be mevatal. So Rabbi say, how do we paskin over here? Because this is actually a very important halacha. Because the ma'isa, again, the shaila over here is going to be, can the husband go ahead and now use this get a second time? So the Shulchan Aruch, this is in Even HaEzer, Simin Kuf Mem Aleph Sif Samech Vav, says the following: Hasholiach get biyad shliach ubitel get. If a man goes ahead and sends a get in the hands of a shaliach, and then what? He's mevatel the get. He's mevatel the get. What's the halacha? Hare ze chozer umegarish bo kisheyirtza. Shulchan Aruch paskins, bless you. Shulchan Aruch paskins that the husband can in fact go ahead and reuse the get to divorce his wife when he so chooses. Why? Shelo bitlo mitoras get, ela mitoras shlichus. Because Rabbi said the way we paskin is when we speak about bit like Nachman, we're not being mevatel the get, because you can't be mevatel a get. Rabbi said that you can't be mevatel a get. Why can't you be mevatel a get? Because at the end of the day, the get is a proper, appropriate document. Rather, what he's being mevatel is the shlichus. The fichach im haya get. So Rabbi said, listen to this. Now there is one exception to this. We're going to see, and we'll see this. I'll just read this to you, but we'll see later on in the Gemara. The fichach im haya haget biyad habal ubitlo kigon sha'omar get ze batalhu. Eino megarish poli olam. We'll say now we're going to see this is true, but yet it's not totally true. There is the ability for the husband to be mevatel the get. We'll discuss that, but for our purposes right now, what's unfolding over here in front of us is what? Is the husband's ability to be mevatel the shlichus. Therefore, in our cases over here that the Mishnah is discussing, his husband is saying, Shliach, I don't want you to go ahead and deliver this get. Therefore, I'm being mevatel shech, but the get itself still stands. And therefore, again, the nafkamina of that is tomorrow, should the husband have a change of heart and say, you know what, I really do want to divorce you, he would in fact be permitted to go ahead and use that same document. Well, so let's just go a little bit weiter. But Rishona Haya Oses. Remember again, the Mishnah said that in the beginning, he used to assemble a bezdin. and what? And be mavatal the get in the presence of the Beis Din, not in the presence of the shaliach or of the isha. Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken negated this process because obviously it can cause catastrophic circumstances because the shliach and the husband or the wife have no idea that the get is batal. Shliach delivers the wife thinks that she's divorced, and chas v'shalom you can have terrible circumstances. Says the Gemara, itmar bifnei kamahu mevatlo. So I'll say, in front of how many witnesses did the husband need to go to Mimavat again? In other words, we'll say all the Mishnah says is that he had to assemble a Beis Din. How many people constitute a Beis Din? This is obviously all pre-Takanas Rabbi Gamliel. How many people are a Beis Din? So says the Gemara, Rav Nachman Amar Bifnei Beis. Rav Nachman said, all you need is 2 people. Rav Sheshes Amar Bifnei Gimel. Rav Sheshes said, no, you need 3. Rav Sheshes Amar Bifnei Gimel. Beis Din Katoni. Rav Sheshes said you need 3. Why? Because again, the Mishnah says a Beis Din. Rabbi said the minimum number for a Beis Din is how much? Is 3. Rav Nachman Amar Bifnei Beis. Trei Nami Beis Din Karilu. Because Rabbi say ultimately Rav Nachman says, as we're going to see, there are certain circumstances where what? Where 2 are called a Beis Din as well. So Rabbi say we'll stop over here. I want to spend 1 minute, if it's okay, taking you back to something we learned in yesterday's daf. I'll say, if you remember again, the Gemara spoke about a case. This is just a beautiful yisod. Just spoke about a case where Rav Huna and Rabbi Hanina were sitting, and Geniva passed by. Remember this case? So the Gemara said they had a machlokes. Should they get up for Geniva? Should they not get up for Geniva? Because Geniva was a Talmud Chacham, but on the other hand, Geniva made Mar Ukva's life exceptionally difficult. So it's interesting that when Geniva came over to them and they said, "What are you guys talking about?" So they said, "Oh, we're talking about the ruchos. We're talking about the winds." So in the Sefer Penina Mikarim, the Mechaber asks, listen to this: "V'lechora kasha." Heich amra lei diberuchos asku, halohema asku bidvar halochim tzrichim lakom mipana, veich amra laim sheker. So when Geniva asked them, what are you learning about? Why did they lie? They weren't talking about ruchos, they weren't talking about winds, or were they talking about abosai? They were talking about, should we get up in front of you or not? In other words, the kasha we were dealing with was you're a Talmud Chacham, but yet you're an exceptionally difficult individual. You're not a nice guy. So we were talking about, again, should we get up in front of you or not? So it's a strange kasha, we'll say. So the Mechaber says, so why didn't they just tell him that? That's what we were discussing. So we'll say, of course, the simple answer was what? Because you're not going to tell Geniva that you were talking about, should we stand up for you or not? But listen to this. He gives a beautiful idea. So he quotes over here, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Kol sharuach habrios nocha himenu, ruach hamakom nocha himenu. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says that Amos is incredible. Whoever gets along with people, if people like you, that's a sign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu likes you. It's very important to say. If people don't like you, that's a sign that God probably doesn't like you as well. But it's just in general, there's an incredible yisod, because there are some people that say, I don't care what people think about me. But say that's a very bad way to live life. You should care about what people think about you. It's very important. Why? Because if you can't get along with people and people don't like you, that's a pretty telltale sign that you probably don't find favor in the eyes of God either. So listen to this. Obi Yerushalmi Yisalehefach. Kol sherach hamakam nochemenu, ruach habrios nochemenu. We'll say the Yerushalmi has an opposite version of this. So in the Bavli version, it's whoever is liked by people is liked by God. In the Yerushalmi version, it's whoever is liked by God is liked by people. Ubazeh pligi Rafuna Rabbi Chanina. Both say that's what these 2 rabbis were arguing about. Demand Amar mekom mekame debar Orionhu Svirlik Yerushalmi. Supposed to hear these 2 versions. The Bavli version of the Yerushalmi is if people like you, God like you. The version of the Yerushalmi is what? If God likes you, then people like you. The machlokes ultimately between Rav Huna and Rabbi Chanina was in these 2 versions. So should we get up in front of Geniva or not? So we'll say, so one opinion said, like the Yerushalmi. So obviously, Geniva is what? Geniva is a Talmud Chacham. If he's a Talmud Chacham, that means God likes him. And therefore, if God likes him, then what? then we need to like him as well, and we should stand up before him. The other opinion said like the Bavli, which is people don't like Geniva. If people don't like Geniva, then what? Then the Maisa again, then God doesn't. He's not Talmid Chacham. He's not Talmid Chacham, and therefore again we shouldn't stand up for him as well. Therefore, when Geniva says, "What are you guys learning?" They say, "What? We're learning about the Ruchos." So they didn't lie to him, because what were they talking about? Kol sharuach hamakom or kol sharuach habrios. They were saying, Geniva, we're talking about you. The shaila is as someone like you who seems to be a great Talmid Chacham, but is not liked by people. What's ultimately, again, the status of such an individual? I say we should stand up for you, because the fact that you're a Talmid Chacham means that God likes you, which means that what? We should like you as well. And other person said that, no, that's not the case. Ultimately, again, people don't like you. Therefore, you might be a Talmid Chacham, that's fine, you have a good mind, but that doesn't mean that the Ribbon Shalom likes you, and therefore we shouldn't stand up before you. But to say, bottom line from the Sugi is a very important yisod. So that, again, it's a cute idea. The Pinei Mikara says that they really were arguing about the Ruchos. But to say the yisod is exceptionally important. How important it is that we have to strive to find favor in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and in the eyes of man. For our purposes, it's both the Bavli and Yerushalmi are correct. We need to live lives where ultimately we find favor in the eyes of people and we find favor in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it can't be an either or. For a person who says, I don't care what people think about me, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. We live in a world of people. You have to care about what people think. We'll say, you see, people make the worst mistakes in life because they think they don't have to care. I could trample over everyone. I could do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter. I know I'm right. You know what we'll say? As they say the road to Gehenna is paved with all kinds of wonderful intentions. If I lead my life trampling over other people, not caring because, hey, I'm right, we'll say that is a terrible, terrible thing to do. On the other hand, to only care about what people think and to not care about what the Ribbon Shalom thinks is, of course, fundamentally flawed as well. Therefore, the right approach is an approach that synthesizes both the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. Person has to care what people think, Ruach HaBrios. Person has to care about Ruach HaMakom. Synthesize the two, a person will be exceptionally successful. All right, we'll stop over here. I'm sorry? You have to, it always comes back to Messias Yesharim.